My name is Joe Prim, and I am the host of Prepare.Defend.Lead. In this episode, I am going to be talking about the whys and the whats of the PDL Budget Overland Project. If that sounds interesting to you, stick around. I'll catch you on the other side of the intro.
The comfort and distractions of today collide to indulge our desires and provide a slow death by apathy. A superior primitive ethos exists. Prepare for tomorrow. Defend what you value and lead those you love. This mindset is the foundation of living an authentic life as a bold, disciplined man resolute in your mission. Prepare, defend, lead. Your mission. Own it.
All right, welcome to Prepare, Defend, Lead. If this is the first time you've listened to this podcast, thanks for coming to check it out. If this isn't your first time and you keep coming back, thanks to you as well. I hope that you guys get something out of this podcast. As I always say, there's a few things that you can do to help me out as I push this mission forward of Prepare, Defend, Lead. Number one, you can subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss an episode. Number two, you can leave a review of this podcast so that somebody that might be looking through iTunes or wherever it is that you happen to keep all your podcasts and leave your reviews, they might be flipping through there looking, and your review might be the difference between them skipping right on by. And number three, you can share this with some friends or those that you think may be able to get something out of this podcast. And as always, you can check out Prepare.Defend.Lead.com for coffee roasted to order, as well as t-shirts and stickers and other swag. I did come out with a new design that is especially for this episode. It's a nice little design. It says for the PDL Overland team. So go to Prepare.Defend.Lead.com and check that out. So if you follow me in what I have going on here with PDL on Instagram, you will see that a few weeks ago I purchased a 2003 Mitsubishi Montero. This is something that I had been thinking about for a while. It's something that had been in the works, at least mentally, maybe not even exactly down on paper, but had been something I had been thinking about for quite some time. For me, the whole off-roading, four-wheel driving, overland idea has been with me for a long, long time. Back when I was a teenager and I spent a few years living down in Central America, down in Guatemala, my parents were running an orphanage down there, and I had a lot of opportunities to go off into remote mountain villages and help with doctor teams and dental teams and other missions teams. And a lot of those villages that we would go into were either only accessible by hiking or only accessible by four-wheel drive vehicle. And there began my passion with four-wheel driving and getting into these mountain villages. I spent a lot of afternoons pushing vehicles through mud and through rough areas in order to get where we needed to go. But the versatility of the vehicles, the idea of being able to access areas that were otherwise inaccessible, especially during rainy seasons, with these vehicles, and I suppose too the adrenaline part of these adventures really embedded in my mind and became a true passion for me during that time. And as I made my transition from Guatemala and the things that I was doing there back to the United States, I had the opportunity, and the first vehicle I purchased once I started working and had settled into a job was a 1996 Nissan hardbody pickup, which I had fallen in love with down there in Guatemala because one of the missionaries, the missionary Greg Miller that we actually support with this podcast, that was his vehicle at that time. So I fell in love with the toughness of that vehicle, the abilities of that vehicle, and made that my first off-road vehicle. And I proceeded to sink some money into that and create off of that platform of that vehicle new wheels and tires and grill guards and lights, and really began my foray not only just into creating a vehicle that reflected me and what I liked to do and my passion and what I enjoyed. Not only that, but also really began, or I shouldn't say began, but continued my love for getting my knuckles banged up and getting my hands dirty under the hood as I learned how to change out parts and pieces and do regular maintenance work on these vehicles. So this whole idea of working on vehicles, this whole idea, and that could even go back to my first vehicle that I ever purchased before I even had gotten my driver's license, was a 1958 Ford F-100. And so I have many years of putting heart and soul and blood back in the days before parts were easy to find on the internet and you had to track things down and dig through catalogs and look for parts and pieces and make phone calls to see if things were going to fit or not work for you. So way back in the day of cash on delivery and things like that, where I was buying up parts and learning how to do these things. And over the years of doing this, it has become something that I still love and enjoy doing. At times, it becomes very difficult to invest the time and energy and effort into doing some of the work, just because most of my vehicles are always daily drivers, and sometimes things need to get fixed rather quickly to avoid delays. But other than that, I'm always game to get under the hood and to learn. And especially these days now with YouTube and being able to find parts quickly and easily and get them shipped out so much faster than we used to be able to do, there's almost no excuse for it. Some of these YouTube videos on changing out parts are unbelievably well done and are a great way to learn how to begin to do some of your own maintenance work or some of your own fixing of issues on your own vehicles, which I recommend to anybody anyway. Not only is it a money saver, but it's also a good way to test yourself and try yourself and challenge yourself and push yourself to learn new things. So for me, that has become something that I really like to do. Sometimes in the middle of it, I'm not so sure why I like to do it, but at the end of the day, when things are wrapped up and you sit back down in that seat and you start the engine and everything's working well and everything is clicked into place and gone the way it's supposed to go, it's a good feeling. So for me, this whole passion, this whole idea of doing this is not new. This passion for off-roading, this passion for doing something for overland has been rekindled in me. And that is for a few reasons. Number one, my kids are a little bit older now. It's a little bit easier now for us to go out camping, to use this vehicle as a recreational vehicle, to go on some long weekend drives and trips, to meet up with people. So things in that part of my life have changed to a point where that's something that I can do more readily. So for me, that's one of the big reasons for doing this, is for recreation. To be able to get out, to be able to drive some trails, spend some time with the family, go on some picnics or day excursions, long weekend excursions, to enjoy our time together, getting out, exploring new areas, meeting new people, seeing new places is a big part of why I'm excited about this. Number two, we'll go back to just what we were talking about, the hobby part. I am excited as I start this out, and I have a clean slate with this Mitsubishi Montero. I have a clean slate to decide how I'm going to build it, how I can make this vehicle a reflection of me, how I can build off of it with my priorities, what I think are the most important aspects, what I think are the weaknesses, to work on those and find ways to accentuate the strengths. And number three is a bug out or a help vehicle. A lot of times, emergencies can arise, whether it's fire or tornadoes or floods, where there is a necessity to leave where you are at in a quick manner. And if you are in a disaster type situation, the more capable of a vehicle that you can have to get out of that area, the better off you'll be. But not only will it work well for getting out of an area like that, it can also work very well for getting into an area like that in order to help out others that may have been put into a difficult situation after a disaster, after a tornado or fires or something comes through. To be able to have a vehicle that can be equipped to get into an area to help out people is another huge bonus to this. So there are really three reasons again: recreation, the fun of adventure and driving. Number two is a hobby for myself to create this vehicle into something that's a reflection of me and to do the bulk of the work myself. And number three, I'll call it some people would call it a bug out vehicle or a go-go vehicle or an egress vehicle. So either way, whatever you want to call it, it's a vehicle to get out the heck out of Dodge when you need to. So as this idea began to form in my mind, I knew I needed to get rid of my big red F-250. The big farm truck had served its purpose and had done what we needed it to do. When we purchased that vehicle, it was for the sole purpose of hauling firewood and animals and hay to our little homestead there in Illinois. And it served that purpose well, and then it brought us all the way down here to Texas, loaded up with the trailer. So that vehicle served its purpose, but the rust on that truck was eating it away, eating it out from underneath me, and was beginning to create more and more problems. So that brought me to this crossroad and brought me to a place where I could think about what vehicle I was going to do next and what avenue I wanted to go down. And it didn't take long to come to the decision that a vehicle that was four-wheel drive, full-size, rear-wheel drive all the time, four-wheel drive, obviously, vehicle would be what I was going to look for. So that kind of leaves us with a few different options in that area. Either a pickup truck, a four-door pickup truck, which leaves you with a few options, or a full-size SUV, which was my preference at this time. I do really like they're old school everywhere else in the world, but obviously fairly new here in our country with the 4 doors and the very short bed. I think that those can be a great option. I did have a Nissan Frontier for 5 or 6 years that was bulletproof during the time that I had it. It never had any real problems with it. Was generally just maintenance that needed to be taken care of, but I didn't do much as far as getting that truck dirty. That truck stayed very clean, and I didn't put a lot of energy or effort into building that truck, that platform out. So, although I do really like those seem to be very expensive right now, especially down here, maybe even more so where I'm at down in Texas with the popularities of pickup trucks. But trying to find a good deal on a 4-door short bed pickup truck, whether it be Nissan, Chevy, or of course Toyota, would be very difficult. Would either have a lot of miles on it or need quite a bit of work. So that kind of pushed those off to one side. So then we started looking at SUVs, and it becomes very, very obvious very quickly that this whole idea of overlanding and going off-road and getting outdoors in vehicles is gaining in popularity. And it's easy to tell that it's gaining in popularity just because of the prices of vehicles. A lot of vehicle prices have shot up quite considerably in the last couple of years, namely with Toyota. It is very, very difficult to find a great deal on a 4Runner or a Toyota pickup, or even or any of the Land Cruisers or anything of that nature at all anymore. I'm not sure what to say other than that. If you're looking at those, you're looking at not a budget overland project. Great vehicles, absolutely love Toyota. Those things are bulletproof, and not only have they proven to be bulletproof here in the United States, but all around the world. Nothing but love for the Toyota crowd. Like I said, I've owned a couple of Nissans, a big fan of Nissan. Like I said, again, not just here in the United States, but another brand that's known around the world for their toughness and great vehicles. Again, what they sell in the United States here, as far as Pathfinder, probably would have been what we were looking at then. And again, very, very difficult to find. I think a lot of these vehicles in the United States here that were in good shape probably left here, probably went south of the border not that many years ago, while they were still at bargain prices. So really kind of left me with a couple of intriguing options. And the two options that intrigued me the most, as I started kind of making my deductions and looking at what I was interested in, was the Mitsubishi Montero and the Isuzu Trooper. Both vehicles with strong pedigrees, both vehicles that are well known around the world, and I started shopping around and looking at those. My preference, really, at the time of when I started looking, was probably for something from the 90s. Probably something ranging from probably 95 to 2000 was my real preference. I really like the boxy style of the Monteros of that time and the Isuzu Troopers of that time range in there. Really boxy looking, really old school, tough vehicles. Vehicles where very little had been changed specifically for the American market. They were basically the same thing that was being sold around the world during that time period. So, did some looking around. In my area, it was extremely hard to find any Troopers. It would be something that I would have had to order in. So, there were a few options for Monteros, third-gen Monteros in my area. So, when one popped up in San Antonio, I happened to have some work going on in San Antonio. I decided that I would drive down there, make a specific trip to that dealership to take a look. While I was at the dealership, the saleswoman was receiving text messages from somebody asking about the Montero, wanting to come take a look at it, and also had another couple that showed up shortly after I arrived that wanted to look at the Montero. The unique thing about both of these customers that showed up to look at the vehicle that I ended up purchasing was that they were already Montero owners. These people were so happy and so liked their Mitsubishi Montero so much that they wanted to purchase a second or third one. So that tells you a lot about the vehicle, kind of just from there. They're wanted, and there's a lot of people looking to get these vehicles right now. So I feel like I got a great deal on the vehicle that I purchased. I ended up with a 2003 Mitsubishi Montero, which is the Montero third gen. That was the last generation that they sold here in the United States. Generation 4 is alive and well all over the world, but Mitsubishi stopped selling the Montero in the United States, I believe, in 2004. So I have one of the very last years where they were selling the Mitsubishi Montero here. One of the craziest things coming from up north, and as I had mentioned, the rust was deteriorating that F-250 out from underneath me, whereas this vehicle here that bounced from California to Hawaii and now back to, or down here to Texas, is so clean. There is little, if any, rust on it at all. The paint job looks great. I've done a little bit of work under the hood already. It's so easy to pull out bolts and to replace them when they're not all rusted. You don't have to soak them and hope that the bolts don't break off. It was getting very, very rough to work on that F-250 and even on the Jeep Patriot that we had, that my wife had as well, just because of the rust. Just basic parts taking apart from under the hood because of the rust was almost impossible. Things always were changing, or I'd have to reinvent ways to make things work. So very cool to have such a clean vehicle and be able to have a platform like this to be able to play around on. One of the cool things about the Mitsubishi Montero really is it has incredible pedigree. It won the Dakar Rally every year from 1985 to 2007. If you don't know, the Dakar Rally was a rally. It still goes on, but they have changed the route because of security reasons down there, I believe, in Senegal. But this rally for years had started in 1978 and was a rally from Paris, France down to Dakar. And I don't know how many miles it is, but it is a real torture test for vehicles, and a lot of these vehicle manufacturers would use that as a testing ground, a real live, long-distance, tough testing ground for their vehicles. And the Mitsubishi Montero won that every year from 1985 to 2007. And Mitsubishi was just never able to use that as a selling point for their vehicles here in the United States, and it just never gained the popularity that they needed here in order to continue producing the vehicle. But as anybody who has spent time working or around a vehicle that is sold all around the world and then is also sold here in the United States, there's a very utilitarian difference to these vehicles. They're just directions are stamped in places where they're visible. They have placards on the back of seats telling you how to fold the seats. There's just simple things that make the vehicle, to me, very cool and very utilitarian. So at this point right now, I'm really excited about what I have. Very excited to start this project. Really excited to turn this into a creation of my own. So as far as priorities in this build out, the first priority for me, I already did a little bit of maintenance work on it, will be to continue doing the maintenance work, to get all the fluids changed out. I don't have any maintenance records for the vehicle at all, so I want to change out the front and rear differential fluids, the transfer case fluids, the transmission fluid, and probably the antifreeze, and then we'll change out the spark plugs, and then probably after that we'll change out the timing belt. So the general main maintenance parts of this vehicle, I want to make sure that are, and probably change out the battery as well. But these main maintenance things are taken care of, and that I can have a date on those, that I know moving forward that those things are taken care of. That's my top priority with this vehicle. And then after that will be to start to build it up as well. For me, one of the top priorities in building it out with accessories will probably be a roof rack. I want to be able to carry the gear that I need, having a family, to be able to go on these excursions and these camping trips and these off-road adventures. So I want to be able to have this vehicle set up to carry the gear that we need to enjoy ourselves. So a roof rack will be a big part of that, especially since we have a big dog that we will want to take along for the journey. And the more space I can give him in the back of the Montero, the better off we will all be. So having a roof rack would definitely help accommodate Big Brutus, who weighed in at 120 pounds last time he was at the vet. So he's on a little bit of a diet right now. See if we can't get him back down to 110. But either way, he's a big boy. Number 2 on that list for me would be some sort of extra lighting. We all know, even just getting out to our property, there's some long stretches of road where there are a lot of animals and no light. So having extra lights on this vehicle would be a big improvement. So that will be high on my list. Number 3, and these aren't in any particular order, but would be newer tires. We'll probably bump up in the size of tires. That's important for me, but I also need to get some better tires on there. Right now I just have regular street tires, and it doesn't take much mud on street tires to render them very, very difficult to maneuver and get your vehicle where you want it to go. So that will be a priority, will be to get some better light truck tires on the vehicle. And number 4 will be a lift. Nothing big, probably between 1.5 inches and a 2-inch lift, maybe not even quite that much. We'll see. We'll play around with that idea a little bit. I'm not exactly sure how much of a lift. I'm not looking for much, just enough to get a little bit extra clearance and get those bigger tires under there. Number 5 then would be an improvement on skid plates. That is really one of the weaknesses, one of the minuses with the Mitsubishi Montero. Mine does have a front skid plate, but there's really not much protecting the transfer case or the transmission. I think that is a priority to get that sorted out, get some protection down there to keep that area protected. And number 6 for me would be getting a snorkel on there. Again, none of these are in any specific order, but we have a lot of dusty roads down here in Texas. In fact, most of the year the roads are dusty rather than muddy. And most of the year you wouldn't have a lot of issues fording any rivers just because they're so low. But being able to have the vehicle sucking in air from up high, especially if you're on trail rides with other people and going down dirt roads, even out to our property, being able to be sucking in a little bit air, a little bit higher, a little bit cleaner. And you got to admit that snorkel gives the vehicles that awesome look as well. As I talked about earlier, with wanting this vehicle to be also a vehicle for getting out of situations, as a vehicle, an egress option, right? An emergency egress option vehicle. For me, a big part of that then is being able to have the gear that you want very easily available and easy to load so that you can go. So as a part of that project for me has been going through my gear and sorting through all the different things that I have, from different types of foods and different types of camping stoves and different types of water filtration and different types of fire starting equipment, to start to go through that and organize up some plastic bins, some plastic containers that I can easily and readily load up into the vehicle in order to leave. These will also be set up basically the same way for going camping, so that these bins can be loaded up easily for going camping. You know, bin 1 will be loaded with, at the moment, bin 1 will be loaded with stuff for water filtration, for cooking, for some foods, plates, knives, seasonings, that type of food stuff, and for starting fires, matches, kindling, just some things like that. Bin 2 will have blankets, hygiene, and medicines. And then bin number 3 will probably have gear and clothes, and then probably bin number 4 will have more clothes, changes of clothes, things of that nature. So we have these bins that we've had for a long time that we've kept different things stored in when we lived on the homestead, and it transitioned during the move, and then they've transitioned during our time here. But I'm utilizing these bins because I know that I can fit 4 of them in the back of the Montero. Did a little goofing around this last weekend, loaded up. I got bin 1 and bin 2 kind of set the way that I want them, or the way that I wanted them. I've already kind of reevaluated and have some ideas for some changes, especially to bin 2. But I tested them out. I made sure that they would fit. So I know that I can fit 4 bins in the back of the Montero, 4 of these bins, along with probably my tent and my generator in the back of the Montero. That's with no roof rack. That's with everybody, including the dog, being able to squeeze in to the front 2 seats. So, as I always talk about in this podcast, no matter what I'm doing, whether it be the homesteading projects or whether it be gear or whether it be the Montero now, one of the biggest focuses, one of the biggest things that I want to get out of it is to have options. And that's why right off the top, I labeled the 3 options with this, right? The 3 things I'm getting out of it: recreation, hobby, and emergency egress vehicle. Those are options. Having different bins with different type of gear and knowing what is in those bins affords me different options of what I'm going to load in at what given time and how things are organized. This way you know what's in it. And as I mentioned in PDL Raw earlier this week, I talk a lot about lying. And a lot of us fall into the trap of lying to ourselves and not realizing the effects of those lies on our lives. In one of those areas, for those that are into preparedness, and that's a big part of what this podcast is about, long-term and short-term preparedness, is a lot of us fall into the trap of lying to ourselves about how prepared we actually are. So my challenge to you guys is to get into your gear, get into those crates, those bins, and start to dig through and see what you actually have. And be honest with yourself about where you are as far as water filtration. Where are you as far as being able to start a fire in a difficult situation? Where are you as far as, for some people, blankets are huge. When we were up north, I always made sure that the vehicles were well stocked with wool blankets for the winter. A car breaks down in the middle of winter in some of those way up where we lived in the rural areas, it would have been a life and death situation if you didn't have something as simple as blankets in your vehicle. So things like that are tremendous. Whether you have batteries for your flashlights, whether you have light, whether you have things for building fire, and start to really break down those lists and be honest with yourself. There are certain pieces of kit, certain pieces of gear that we all love, right? That we all want. Maybe it's night vision or something crazy like that, right? Where it's something that we are wanting to tell ourselves that this is what we need. This is what we need next. But the reality is there are some simple, cheaper things that we would be much better off spending our hard-earned money on to put ourselves into a better situation, and things that would be a great option to have on a camping trip or in an emergency situation. So that's kind of my challenge to you guys, and I'm going to be doing the same as I go through and make sure I have batteries for the different things that I use and different ways to charge up those batteries to keep things charged. And one of the first things I'll do on the vehicle, on the Montero 2, is get the inverter mounted under the hood so that I can use that whenever I need to for powering things up and for charging things. So as I build this out, I will continue to talk about this project on this podcast. I will continue to talk about this project on Instagram via my live daily show that I do, PDL Raw. I will continue to post pictures of the project as it goes on and what I'm working on as the vehicle changes and we go on different adventures. That will all be posted up on Instagram. That Instagram right now is my main focus on social media. That is where I have my biggest footprint. That is where I spend the bulk of my energy on social media, in that one place. I know that that's not my best bet to keep everything in one place, but for right now, that's what it is. I was starting to try to push into Parler. We all know what happened there. So as we move forward, I will probably be starting to use the platform Locals at locals.com a lot more. That is a much more open platform for sharing content, and that will probably be the next area that I go into. It's also an area where I can separate things out as far as videos for subscription and have some things that on some content there that will be free and other content there that will be hidden behind a subscription wall that will help me push this forward, help me make some money to help pay for this podcast as we move forward with what's going on here. So that will probably be the platform that I start to migrate to. If you'd like to check it out, be sure to check out. I've been doing a show every day since this year started, and I've committed to continue to do this throughout this year, which is PDL Raw on Instagram. It's usually about between 2 and 10 minutes of just my thoughts for the day, something that I've learned, something that I picked up from a podcast, something that I picked up from a conversation, and sometimes it's just what I did that day that I enjoyed or what I did that day that I hated. Either way, just kind of me getting some stuff off my chest, just sharing with you as if you were sitting in the Montero in the seat next to me and we're just chewing the fat. So again, check out Prepare.Defend.Lead.com. You can buy t-shirts and swag there to help keep this podcast going. And as we continue forward, or as I continue forward with the PDL Budget Overland Project here, I would like to also keep you guys updated on the costs on things. I think it's really important. I spent, the cost on the Montero was right around $6,000. I would like to, and my goal right now is to prove that you, for under $10,000, you can have a solid overland vehicle. So that's my goal with this being a budget project, to show that for under $4,000, we can change this vehicle into something that can do what we need to do, go where we need to go, and be equipped with what we need to get there. I hope you enjoyed this podcast. If you did, share, subscribe, review this podcast. I would appreciate it. And with that, as always, hold fast and God bless. One more thing I forgot to mention. I had mentioned in PDL Raw on Sunday that I was going to talk a little bit about the PDL Overland team, which is just in its infancy. It's more of an idea than anything else, but I would absolutely love to be able to get together with some of those that listen to this podcast and others down here in Texas that would like to go on some overland adventures, whether they're just overnight trips or long weekends. If this is something you think you'd be interested in, getting together with me and maybe some fellow PDL people to go drive around, show off our vehicles, have a little bit of fun, have some good times, some good eats hanging out, hit me up on direct message on Instagram, and we'll see if we can't get this the PDL Overland team off the ground and moving forward. All right, then. I'll let you guys go. You guys have a good day and hold fast and God bless.